Hello, and welcome to the Sailing and Cruising the East Coast of the United States podcast. I'm Bela Musits.
And I'm Mike Wasserman.
Hey, Mike. Today's guests on the podcast are Sawyer and Simon Balint. They've been on the podcast numerous times, and every one of these episodes is really good. So if folks haven't listened to them, you should give them a listen. Now, last summer, they crossed the Atlantic Ocean from Newport, Rhode Island, and ended up in the UK. And in this conversation, what we talk about is, okay, now that you've crossed the big ocean, how are you going to get the boat back to the United States? So what are your options? And if you do want to check out their other episodes, they've been on the podcast in episode 29, 84, 85, 88, 92, 93, and 120. And all of these episodes have something to do about their boat or preparing their boat to cross the Atlantic, then the actual crossing the Atlantic. We had several episodes on that. And now this episode and the most previous one, episode 120, we talk about some of the things that they learned during that crossing and some of the things that they did once they got to the other side of the Atlantic.
Cool. So, and it's always the case with Simon and Sawyer. It's fascinating. They both tell a great story and really share their experiences in a rich way. But listeners, look out for kind of this interesting notion of you spend all this time planning for this big trip, and a lot of times you're not really focused on what happens on the back end. You get somewhere and how do you get back, like you said? So we'll talk through lots of different options, and you can think about as they're going through what their options are. Think about what you do, and then kind of at the end, Simon will reveal what they did, and you can compare notes. So I don't know. What do you think, Bela? Let's get right to it.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's dive right into this interview with Simon and Sawyer. Hello, Sawyer. Hello, Simon. Great to see you guys again.
Hey, Bela.
Hey, Bela. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. So as listeners may remember, last summer, you guys sailed across the Atlantic Ocean. It's your first Atlantic crossing. And, I was thinking about this. When I go sailing for a day sail or even, for a few days, it's always a round trip. Or at least it's planned as a round trip. I go out, I sail, I come back to my marina or some other marina. And when you do longer trips, like let's say you do, Newport to Bermuda race, or you do down to the islands. From New England, you go down to the islands, or you cross the Atlantic. It takes a long time to do that, and maybe you don't have the time, but you got to get the boat back somehow too. So as you guys were sailing across the Atlantic, were you thinking about how we're going to get the boat back?
I think that's where I first started thinking about it, but I definitely, to be honest, hadn't put that much thought into it before we left. Right. So we've talked about this in the earlier podcast, right? We certainly spent a lot of time preparing for our trip, from like equipment and, improving our skills and food and all those various things. I mean, it was a lot of time and energy, right? Over the course of 5 years, but in an intensive way for the year leading up to this trip. But the end point of that preparation was landing in the UK in my mind. And I didn't really think, what was going to happen after that. So you remember, do we have any ideas, or we talk about it, or it was a sort of black hole?
It was a bit of a black hole. I mean, I think there's really only three options when you think about it. And I think we were aware of those options going into it, but option one, and maybe the one that even though we didn't talk about that much, the one that we were maybe leaning towards was, we sail the boat over there and then it stays over there for a little bit. And, I had some friends, whose families had done something similar, where they had sailed the boat over and then they kept it in England. And, they kept it there for a few years, and they'd fly out to England and do some sailing in the channel and stuff. And I remember we had this thought of, like right now the boat's in Rhode Island, but you're in New York, and now I'm in Massachusetts. And, so you have to get down to the boat, and we sail for like a week or two per summer. And so what's the difference between doing that and taking a 6-hour flight and then doing the same thing in a different place?
I do remember that now.
Yeah. So that was one option. And option number two, of course, is to sail it back. We can go into more detail about what that would entail, but in brief, you go to the Azores and you go to England, and then you can't just turn around and go back the way the Pilgrims went. You have to go down south and take the trades back into the Caribbean, and so it's a long sail. And I think when we first started thinking about an Atlantic crossing 5 years ago, I think that might have been kind of our thought, but the reality of the situation when we left was that both of us had lives that we had to return to at the end of the summer. Right? We couldn't spend the rest of the year sailing. And then the third option would be to get the boat back to the United States without us on it. Either with like a delivery crew or to ship it back or something along those lines.
Yeah. So I remember actually now. So that's good that you kind of jogged my memory. I remember the discussion of the boat has to be somewhere, and that's something I kind of realized after owning a boat. And I'm sure everyone that listens that owns a boat, has thought about that. The boat has to be somewhere, and you're paying for it to be somewhere, basically, right? Unless you have a big long dock. And actually, the U.S. Is a very expensive place to keep a boat. We learned that when we were out to the Azores in Spain. So, at least up here, Bela, right, in the New England area, it's, for a night is what, $5 a foot, $6 a foot, probably more now. And it's right peak season. So if you have a 40-foot boat, it's like a couple $100. And then for a season, it could be, several $1,000s. In Spain, it was, $20 a night and in a couple $1,000 for the season. So if your boat has to be somewhere, you could keep it overseas. And we had the idea like, well, maybe we could explore over 3 or 4 years, Europe, go around the UK, coast of Scandinavia, places that people go, right? The Mediterranean, and have those be our like sailing adventures each summer, even a couple of weeks. It's not nothing. You have to fly there, but flights aren't terrible, and it's not from the East Coast. It's not that long to get overseas, get to Europe. So that was that was kind of one loose idea. But I think leading up to actually going, the plan that had sort of come together in my mind was that we would sail to England. That was our goal. Remember, for some personal family reasons, we wanted to get to England, and then Sawyer would come home. He had to start his PhD program. I would leave the boat in the UK that winter. I actually found a marina that would take the boat and had a schedule for getting it hauled. I talked to people about do I need to wrap a boat or not in the UK, and learned all that, and had the right insurance in place to do it. And then I would go out like the next summer, and Sawyer's busy now, so I would find someone, maybe Bela, maybe somebody else, to sail with me from the UK, and we would do like the next, leg of that journey, right? As Sawyer said, go from the UK to like the Canary Islands, maybe, and then same thing, haul the boat, leave it there, and then the next year do the next leg. And the seasons change, right? So when you do the trade passage, that's usually a winter time trip, and then get to the Caribbean and then come up. So that was kind of my rough plan that I had as we left. And I think I had that plan in my mind for about 2/3 of the way to the Azores, and then then I changed my mind.
So, it's interesting that you, Sawyer, you brought up the notion of keeping the boat there. There's another podcast that I listen to. It's called Sailing the Mediterranean and Beyond. And it's a person that lives in Salt Lake City, Utah, in the United States, and keeps his boat in the Mediterranean, specifically and typically in Greece someplace. And he takes like 6 weeks off every summer, and he flies to Greece, commissions his boat, sails it around for 5 weeks, and then, basically puts it away and comes back the following year. And to your point, that can often be very cost advantageous, because things are much cheaper from a mariner perspective outside of the United States, particularly outside of New England. New England.
I'm sure you've got listeners all over the U.S. and the world probably, but here in New England, Yeah, it is expensive. When we went to A Coruña in Spain, so northern coast of Spain, gorgeous. I mean, totally amazingly gorgeous, right? And this beautiful marina right in the downtown area with old, probably Roman era stone walls and whatnot. Just for fun, we asked them like what the seasonal rate was, and they said, "Oh, it's actually a year," and it was like $2,200 for a year, which compared to New England is extremely, extremely cheap, probably a third of the price.
Right.
So then we
Right.
did kind of just have a daydream, like, gee, maybe you leave the boat in Spain and you fly over once or twice a year and have a good size, window to sail, a couple weeks. That actually would be cheaper if you could, if your lifestyle could
Right.
manage, right? If you could get time off and everything else. Yeah, there are different options, but yeah, I had this idea that I would bring it back in chunks. What I realized, 10 days in probably, I realized the obvious, which has kind of always been the case in my life. It takes me a while, and I realize it. So one thing I realized is this is super hard, right? It's super, super hard. We talked about that just from a lack of sleep and the stress and all the issues, seasickness, right? With making these big passages. It's just really, really difficult. So, the idea of doing another big passage from the UK down to like the Canaries, and then another big passage to the Caribbean, and another big passage up, that was kind of less appealing, at least in the moment, right? On day 12 or whatever of feeling kind of lousy. But more importantly, I was thinking like, okay, I really love what we're doing because it's myself and my son and my father, and we had this trip of a lifetime. So it's great. But, this next potential leg I'm thinking about, they're not going to be available. And so it's going to be myself and a friend, I guess, or maybe a random person I find on find a crew kind of website, which really have the same value to me. I sort of felt like there's a lot of value in making this trip with family, and there's a lot of also sort of a personal goal accomplishment of crossing the Atlantic. But doing these other legs, in my mind, was like a little bit more of a chore now at this point to get back, and not doing it with my son and my dad. So it was sort of less appealing. And then, when you're sailing, you have a lot of time to think, right? You're sitting there, you're thinking, I'm like, okay, how am I gonna get like 2 months, 3 months off a year for the next 4 years? Like my business partner is gonna, divorce me. He's not gonna let me do that. It's crazy. So, maybe I should start thinking about some other options. And that's when we started to think about that. So we can talk about that too.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about the options you considered for bringing the boat back.
Okay. Well, the first one I had was a delivery captain, because remember when we first started thinking about boats and what boat to buy and all that kind of stuff, we watch YouTube and we read books, and there was the guy, John Krushner, is that his name?
Yeah.
He's really well known and well regarded in the sailing world. He does a lot of offshore kind of training cruises, and maybe he still does, but at least he's got to start doing the delivery, right? So I knew about him. I've read some stories about his deliveries, and I knew that was a service. So I thought, okay, maybe we could get to the UK as planned, and I can store the boat as planned because I already had a marina, and kind of just take a breath, right? Go back home, regroup, and then, try to figure out a delivery company where you get, from what I've known, I had to look it up more, it's a big crossing, right? So you're gonna need a captain and probably 2 crew at least. At least that's what insurance requires. At least our insurance was 3 people, but maybe they're gonna want 4, right? So you have two watches, 2 people at a time, right? So you're gonna need a crew of 4. But people must do this. I'm not sure exactly what it costs, but we'll figure that out. So that was my thought. And once I got to the Azores, I would be able to get online and kind of research it a bit more. So that's where I was at. You think of that, Sawyer, the delivery, or?
Yeah, I remember us, chatting about it a little bit. I think, one of the other things that became really apparent over the course of this crossing is that ocean going sailing is really hard on the boat. It's really hard on the equipment. I mean, the wear and tear is the equivalent of multiple years being compressed into just a week or two. And so I remember we were, talking about and thinking through this, like what a delivery would entail just for the boat itself. It's a lot of miles, and it's almost a 40-year-old boat, and we've upgraded a lot of the equipment, but there's some stuff that's a little finicky, right? And like we know how to jiggle the wire and get it to work, but it's not everybody knows that. And we were thinking through the scenario of the delivery crew gets to the Canary Islands, and the engine seized because it ran out of oil, and then what? Then we have to navigate this whole process of the boat stuck in the wrong place, and we got this whole crew and these maintenance issues, and it just seemed like there was, in addition to what we knew, which is that it was going to add a lot of wear and tear to the boat, there was also this big unknown of are they just going to get it across easy, or are there going to be all these issues, or are people going to be flaky?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I said, yeah. So the delivery was like what I knew, but yeah, we did experience, right, a lot of things breaking. And Sawyer and I know our boat inside and out, and we're able to fix those things. It did become a little bit hard to imagine how this crew is going to fix all the stuff that we had to fix, or are they going to really care? Or so in the case of our engine, particularly, it's a little embarrassing, but maybe it's kind of common. So we have a Perkins 4018, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a very
4108, yeah.
4108, yeah, 4118. So it's a British-made tractor engine that is a very reliable engine. It goes in a lot of boats. We've got about 4,000 hours on our boat, and it typically can go for 10, 12,000 hours. So it's a little beast. It works great, but like a lot of British mechanical things, it leaks oil. Right? There's a couple jokes. One is people refer to the Perkins as an externally lubricated engine. And then the other thing I've heard is like, how do you know when your engine's like out of oil? And the answer is it stops leaking, right? So our engine leaks a lot. We have a system with a tray and pads, so we can capture any oil. But basically, we've come to where it's like for 12 hours of runtime, we've got to put about 12 to 14 ounces of oil in the engine. So we know what it is, and we actually don't even really need to use a dipstick anymore because we know how long we've been running. And we just put the right amount of oil in, and it's fine. But you do have to kind of pay attention. So we had some parts of the passage, right, Sawyer, where it was calm, and we were like motoring for 10 hours to try to get somewhere. And we had to sort of have our alarm set so that we knew, okay, we're at like 9 hours here. We better add some oil. And so is a crew we hire going to do that? Are they going to forget that? Are they going to oversleep? Engine's running and then it's seized, and then that's a problem, right? Now we're in the Canary Islands and the engine needs to get replaced, and we're trying to figure out who's to blame, and ultimately it's going to be our problem, I guess, right? Because we want the boat back. So
yeah. As you're saying these things, it's got me thinking about two things. One is, I think every boat has these little quirks about it.
Yeah.
Whether it be like you said, the electrical wire you need to jiggle to make something work, or you got to hit the water pump twice to turn it on, or whatever. Every boat has those. And, you got to communicate those to somebody else. And it takes you several years to figure out those quirks on a boat.
Yeah.
If you're sort of an average casual sailor. So, you have to have those someplace. And most of the times the knowledge for those things is just in our brains. It's not written down anyplace because it's just you and whoever else you sail the boat that know about it. And the other thing that sort of strikes me is I'm pretty possessive about my boat. The notion of some stranger, I know they're a certified captain, blah, 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 taking my boats, like for a month to bring it across the ocean. I don't know. It just, maybe I'm too emotionally attached to it or something.
Yeah. And we are too. I mean, that's kind of our personality anyway. We try to make our things kind of nice, right? But But then also with this crossing, I remember feeling another level of like, I don't know, emotional attachment to this boat, right? Because it kept us safe and it did all these things. Like we're really attached to this boat. This boat. So I mean, so clearly people deliver boats all the time, and I'm sure they do a good job most of the time, right? So these are not new things, but they were crossing our mind. The other thing, so besides just like maybe making a mistake and causing some damage, we were thinking about, you know, our trip to the UK was about 4,500 miles, nautical miles. Maybe more a little bit because you don't go straight, right? So it's about that. But to get back, you got to go typically down and then back over and then back up. So that's probably another 10,000 nautical miles. So even if everything is working great and they don't, and the crew, this delivery crew doesn't break anything, you know, 10,000 more miles on the sails, that means new sails for sure. However many thousand hours on the engine, probably a new engine, even if it, you know, didn't seize, it might be, you know, getting kind of close, and who knows what else, right? So, you know, in the back of my mind too was whatever it's going to cost for a delivery crew to bring it, I do have to also factor in, you know, another 10,000 miles, or basically the equivalent of 10 years of wear on the boat, right? And what does that mean from a financial standpoint? So that was some things we were thinking.
Yeah, that's a great point. I bet you. I mean, I certainly wouldn't have thought about that. You know, sitting at my desk trying to think about, okay, how am I going to get my boat back? Is that if someone brings it back for you, there's, like you said, 10,000 miles and a whole bunch of hours of wear and tear on the boat, and chances are not just wear and tear, something's going to break.
Yeah.
So it's going to be more than just wear and tear. It's going to be breakage and wear and tear.
No, it's breakage and just, you know, that depreciation or that, you know, lack of useful life that's going to be left. So there's that. So but that kind of, so I think still we had delivery, you know, I sort of had come to this realization that, you know what, I'm probably not going to bring it back myself. But we could maybe look into the delivery company as an option. So, but at the Azores, actually, I was there for about 3 weeks, so I had to quickly fly home, take care of some business, and then came back. So I got to meet and talk to a lot of people. And actually, when we got to the Azores, luckily there was a spot on the wall in Horta that we got to park at. They actually raft you up 3 deep in Horta because there's not that much space and there's nowhere else to go, right? So we were on the wall, which meant I didn't have to move the boat. But over the 3 weeks or 4 weeks, boats would come and go, right? Raft up to me and then go away. So I sort of got to know a lot of people and was more one of the more senior people on the boat on the wall after like 10 days, right? So I think I ended up meeting 3 different crew that were delivery crew, and one actually like came and rafted up against me for like a week. There was actually another boat just in front of me that on the back of the boat it said Champlain, New York. So that's where we have a camp. And I was like, oh wow, you guys from, you know, where are you from? Like Burlington? And they were French speaking, and they said, no, we're just delivering the boat for someone. We're going to the Mediterranean, the owner. So as you talked about, like someone was having a boat delivered that way and then going to go fly out. So I got to chat with these delivery folks and get to know them a little bit more. And I guess my impressions weren't all that great. Not saying there aren't great delivery companies out there. I'm sure there really are. But the ones that I happened to meet, yeah, they were good, maybe good sailors. In every case, actually, there was like a captain who was fairly experienced, and then they had some deckhands. And the deckhands actually were like going to the Azores, and then they were leaving. They were flying home or whatever, and they were going to get new deckhands. And they had put up ads in the local bar, you know, looking, it's almost like Moby Dick times, right? You know, looking for people to join the ship, right? So they were, I think, but they were experienced sailors. They were good sailors, but like you were saying, Bill, not super careful with the boat. So in the case of the boat that had, you know, from Champlain, or Lake Champlain, I was on our boat at the wall, and I remember the boat coming in, and I wasn't sure where they were going to dock. Are they going to dock next to me? And they were going to go right in front of me. So I kind of get out to see if I could sort of help them or whatnot. It was a little bit windy, and they came in too hot and hit the wall. I mean, it's a stone wall, right? hit the wall, and put some damage kind of on the rub rail, and certainly was like not a really gracious arrival. So we got him tied up, and I was like, "Oh man, like how's your boat? Is everything okay?" And the guy goes, "It's a delivery. It's not my boat." So yeah, it's it made us kind of think about that. But we did talk to people, and at least the kind of rates I heard, and it may change. It probably depends on your boat and what time of year you want to go in the crossing. Was that captain was looking at like around $500 a day, and then the deckhands were a couple $100 a day, and then you also had to pay for flights and provisions and whatnot. So somewhere in the $1,000 a day range. So it's not cheap. And then of course over and above that you're going to have the wear and tear on your boat.
Yeah.
So that got me thinking, maybe is there any other like solution to get the boat back? And remember, Sawyer, it was like several years ago, we were like just tooling around Newport, and this like big, I don't know, like cargo ship like sailed in, like one of those 800-foot cargo ships or something like silly, and it had containers and whatnot. But up on the deck there were like 4 or 5 boats, like just like the ones that are hauled out of your marina, like on cradles. And I never heard of that before or seen it. I'm like, what is that? And I think it was boats coming in for the boat show, the like Newport boat show.
Yeah, I do remember that. In fact, we might have been going to that boat show in those early years. Yeah, it's funny, there's a wide range of ships that come in and out of Narragansett Bay because they're building the wind turbines and stuff. And I remember seeing the silhouette and being like, what the heck is that? And then it gets closer and you realize that there's power boats and sailboats, 4 or 5 up on the deck, a little crane to like launch them. And it was an eye-opening experience. I was like, wow,
that actually happens.
Can't believe anybody would do that.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, because about Narragansett Bay, last time I was out at the boat, I was sailing around up near us, way in the northern end, and one of those boats was coming down the channel. So they must have gone all the way up to Providence to either drop something off or pick something up.
Yeah. So
that's the
only reason I knew about it. I mean,
yeah.
Other people are like, yeah, of course they deliver boats. I didn't really think about it, but I had that in my mind. So, remember Bob Foreman? He's been on your show, right? And
yes,
old friend from RPI days. So I talked to him before we left, and he's done a lot of sailing, and he's done I think 2 of those like transatlantic races, Newport to somewhere in the like western part of the UK. Where it's actually a race. It's different class boats, and you get there in 15 days or whatever. And I was thinking, like, I'm pretty sure he didn't sail it back. I don't know. So I texted with him and said, Bob, when you did this race and you get to the end, the finish line, right? Then what happens? He goes, oh, I shipped it back. I was like, oh, really? How does that work? So he told me a little bit about it, and then he gave me the name of a person to reach out to. And then I started, looking online, and I reached out to like 3 different companies that do this. And they, this is their business. They specialize in shipping boats from point A to point B. Sometimes they're people like ourselves that got somewhere and now need to bring it back. But they do a lot of shipping for boat shows, right? It makes sense. If you're a French manufacturer of a boat and you want to have it at whatever, the Newport Boat Show or Fort Lauderdale Boat Show, you want the latest and greatest brand new thing, you're not going to sail it over and have 10,000 miles of wear on it, right? You're going to ship it over and make sure it's nice and clean. So, lo and behold, their boats are going back and forth across the Atlantic. I'm sure other places bringing people's sailboats and power boats. So, I called and talked to people and ended up kind of engaging with a company that could basically ship our boat from Southampton, which is where we were heading anyway, Southampton, the UK, to Newport, Rhode Island. And that's a pretty common route. And they had a boat leaving in mid-September, they said, that they could get us on. We were planning to get to the UK in kind of middle of August. And so the plan at that point was, all right, I'll book this spot and we'll get to the UK when we can get there. And then I can leave the boat at the marina that I've, been talking to. I can fly home, take care of business, do what I need to do, and then fly back, a couple days before the pickup and arrange for the boat to get picked up. And so that was that was our new plan now. We had a way to get the boat back from Southampton, and then sort of I continued on the rest of our journey.
Excellent. So what do you have to do to sort of prep the boat, get the boat ready, and then what's involved in the actual process of shipping it back?
Yeah.
I think that I remember your contact with the company put it in the simplest terms. It was great. It's like you're trying to prep the boat for a winter storage, essentially, right? So everything that you would do to, like, at the end of the season to decommission the boat, aside from pumping antifreeze everywhere, is pretty much how you want to prepare the boat. So take the sails down, pull off your bimini, have the water tanks empty, have your perishables off of the boat. That's kind of your step one in terms of getting it prepped. Simon, you can talk more about I'm trying to remember logistically, like if we had to get a special insurance for the trip.
Yeah,
back,
there's some elements
that
there.
worked.
Yeah, but so in terms of like prepping the boat, I sort of mentioned getting things off. Yeah, it's like winter storage, and they send you a I don't know, like a dummy's guide, right? It's frequently asked questions, and here's what you got to do. And that one of the elements there is they said, take everything off your boat that's on deck. Dinghies, your bimini, maybe things you wouldn't even normally take off for winter storage. And because you don't know the weather that's going to be out there, and they don't want something blowing off. And the way they explained it, which makes a lot of sense, is that, unlike the sailboat, these big cargo ships, they're under power, and they go in the direction they want to go, right? They're not tacking. They're not trying to go downwind, right? So they just put autopilot, Southampton to Newport, and they press the button and they go at like 20 knots, right? 20, 23 knots, 25, depends on the ship, right? That's where they go. If they're going into a 30-knot wind, don't really care, they'll do it. That's 50 knots across the deck. And, they're going from east to west, and most of the storms are blowing from west to east. So it's really common for them to be getting 50 plus knots across the deck. That's a big wind, right? If you were in your marina here and there's a forecast for 50-knot winds, you'd be taking everything off of your boat. So that's what they say you need to, prepare for. So we had to do that. And then, there's actually several other things you need to do. So the way it works is they kind of reserve a slot for you. They say, okay, we got this boat. It's going to arrive in Southampton, and you've got a spot on that boat. You give them a deposit or whatever, and you sign a contract. So that's your spot. But they don't know exactly when the boat's going to show up. Just like everything in the water world, right? It's kind of an approximation. So in our case, actually, we were planning for September 15th, and then I think on like August 7th, he called me. We were in France, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the guy called me, and he's like, hey, I don't know if you're interested, but we got a boat that's going to leave on August 18th, and there's an extra spot. And I'm I can get you onto that boat. I know you said you were planning to go home and back first, but if that works for you, you can take it, but let me know right now. So I said, okay, we'll take it. So now we're on the August 18th spot. But even then, that's not like August 18th. The way it works is that's your approximation. And then as you get closer, they begin to give you like a more clear window. So it's the first correspondence you get is August 18th to 21st, right? And then 6 days before that, you get an email that says 18th to 19th. And then they say, okay, 18th. And then they say, should be 18th sometime in the morning, right? So it keeps getting like narrower. And then what happens at 7 in the morning on the 18th, this guy calls you. He's like, Simon? Like, yeah. All right, look out to the left. You see our boat? And then sure enough, there's this cargo ship coming in. It's like, all right, I need you to follow us. And then we're going to meet you in like H zone of the, of the port. So that's how it works from a timing standpoint. And so you need to be, if you're planning this, you kind of need to be with the boat. They do offer a service. They'll connect you with a third party. you can't be with the boat, where they'll basically hire a captain who does this for you. Obviously you got to pay for that. I'd say it's probably a little bit difficult to just leave your boat with the keys on it and then have someone pick it up, right? Because there's a little bit of moving around. And in our case, yeah, we basically stayed with the boat right until it left. We stayed about a week in the south coast of the UK until we were ready to go. So there's that. The other element is all of the taxes and import and export paperwork that goes on. So every country is different. And in the UK, they've got rules about how long a boat can be in the UK before you have to pay VAT, which is like the sales tax. And you need to clock in and kind of explain what you're doing, and then clock out and get it approved by their customs, bureau. It's a little bit maybe cumbersome and daunting. And if you don't do it right, they can slap you with I think it's 20% or some, pretty large amount of sales tax. But the shipping company will take care of that. So there's another person that calls you. So you got your sales rep, right? And then there's a kind of like a port master. That's the person who called me at 7 a.m. and said, get ready. And there's also a whole like administrative person who does all the, the paperwork for the import and export duties. And they send you documents and you fill them out, you send them back, and they kind of handle that, which is really nice because you don't want to do it incorrectly, right? Then there's another element, which is what they take care of. It's kind of nice, a little bit like white glove service. When we were coming into the UK, this was our first time in a while leaving the European zone and entering a new like immigration zone, because England now is separate from from Europe. So we had to clock out of France, and then we have to like call and get into the UK. They actually managed all of that. So again, we had scan our passports, give them the information, and they said, text us when you're like close to Dover. And we did, and we got into the place we're going to stay in Southampton, like at 8 a.m, right, sir? Mm-hmm. And then I get a phone call, and it's a guy in a nice British accent, and he's from the immigration service, and this is Simon Balint. Yes, welcome to the UK. Can I just ask you a couple questions? How many people are on board? Do you have any firearms? Whatever those questions are. And then I said, no, we're good. I said, okay, all set. Welcome to the UK. Enjoy your stay. So they kind of managed that. Obviously behind it was some paperwork, right? And they managed me coming in legally, and then then exiting legally with the boat.
Very nice. Very nice.
Sorry, maybe you were kind of like in charge as we like sailed to the ship and got it ready.
Yeah, I was
a crazy experience.
I was going to say that was there were a lot of crazy experiences of this trip. A lot of things that were new and that you don't really experience as a coastal sailor. But by far, one of the strangest was motoring into this commercial shipyard, the port of Southampton, and there's all these big container ships and tugboats going back and forth. And never in my wildest dreams would have thought that I'd be, docking up to container ship berth H12 or whichever one we were at. So, we're motoring in and we're looking around trying to find our container ship, right? Because we saw it coming in, but there's, like a marina, a lot of container ships, and we're going back.
It's a big port. Southampton's like one of the biggest ports in the world.
Yeah, it's huge. Well, we find our ship, and we motor up alongside, and some guy in a hard hat sticks his head out like, "Hey, Simon!"
Yeah, and he's like, he's like 200 feet in the air, right? I mean, like we're like a toy boat up against a giant container ship.
And so the whole process was at the time it felt a little bit stressful, but in hindsight it was really straightforward. So the container ship is like a giant seawall. So you set up all the fenders you have on one side, and then you're just going to kind of wrapped up against the seawall, and the boat's going to move up and down with the waves, and the container ship is essentially stationary. And then they throw down, some big heavy lines that act as your dock lines, and then they use those to keep the boat in position. So they throw them, 200 feet down to you onto the deck, and then you tie them up somewhere. And then they throw I don't know what's called like a monkey ladder But,
I
one
think
was like
a Jacob's ladder. It's like a rope.
Jacob's ladder. Yeah,
rope,
that's right.
rope
Jacob's
ladder. Yeah.
A rope ladder. Yeah, they throw that down, and 3 or 4 guys come down onto the boat. A diver goes in the water, and then they start this hoist operation. So the container ship has, in our case, had a couple of cranes on it. They used one crane for us, and it had a I don't know what to for, like a harness system essentially for the boat. So there's this like large metal contraption that was hanging from the crane, and then from that contraption there are these straps that they would then use to lift the boat. So they bring it down, they put the straps in the water, and then using the diver, they position the straps in the right place to make sure that you're not going to crush the propeller shaft, or that the straps aren't going to slide off, etc. And then they
the
just
one thing.
hoisted-
Wait, the one
go
thing.
ahead.
The one thing we had to do. It's a little different than when your boat gets taken out in the winter at your marina. They would do all this. The diver's in the water, and he's making sure the straps are right. But the crew doesn't want to actually adjust your boat. They don't want to take that responsibility. So when they were putting in the straps, they realized that our backstay had to get moved. It was kind of in the way, and so we had to take down our backstay, which I hadn't done before, but they told me how to do it. Not that hard. So you got a screwdriver, right? You got to loosen the turnbuckle, take the backstay off. That allowed them to, get the straps where they wanted to, and then they could lift us up. So I remember doing. Go ahead.
I was going to say, one thing I remember from that is we were, we have an SSB radio antenna that goes up the backstay, and so we undid the backstay and we got it loose, but there's still the antenna there, and it wasn't going as far. And so I remember, like, I kind of looked to the foreman, like, is this enough? Like, no, we got to move. So I just grabbed some wire clippers and just clipped the antenna, because we had to move. Like, these guys don't wait around.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that they were certainly nice-ish, but yeah, like, ultimately they motored into like Southampton, and we were the first boat, I think, and then they loaded up like 8 or 10 boats, and then they took off. Like, this whole operation was like 12 hours. So
yeah,
they're not like, waiting for us to try to figure out how to disconnect our SSB. We could tell. Okay, we just cut it. But I remember, yeah, so we cut that, right? And the backstay's loose, and then we were doing something. And then I looked, and it seemed like we were further up the ship than we'd started, right?
Yeah. They started hoisting us up with pretty much no warning. Like, which is not a common, I mean, typically, like at a marina, if you get your boat hoisted, they don't really let you hang out on the boat.
Yeah.
But in this case, yeah, they hoisted us up.
It was wild. Yeah, it was. So I remember saying, like, oh, like, do we need to like go up the ladder? He's like, no, actually, it's safer to just hoist you up with the boat rather than have you like go up that. So yeah, it was like an amusement ride, right? Slow motion. We're on this boat, our 25,000-pound boat that we had sailed across the Atlantic, and we're sitting on it, and 3 guys, and Sawyer and I, and my aunt actually was over there too, hoist us up. But they didn't actually bring us right into the deck, right? Once we got to the top, then we were close enough, and then a guy helped us just jump across to get onto the deck.
Yeah,
and then they made us kind of get out of the way while they, did their thing, and brought it to. So yeah, tell me, how about, do you remember like the whole thing with the cradle? That was kind of cool too.
Yeah, I remember, we get out on deck and we're looking around, there's no cradle. And this boat is slowly approaching us on its crane, and we're wondering where it's going to go. And so they essentially make a cradle in place. They weld it together. They have these, legs that they look kind of like a jack stand at a marina, but they're more substantial. And they can adjust the height and whatnot, and they put it in place, and then they just weld it straight to the steel deck.
Yeah.
And they have a whole team of welders working on that. And I would say they had the boat welded to the deck within, it was less than an hour, maybe half an hour.
Yeah,
that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and then
the cradle's welded to the deck, and the boat sits on the cradle. You said they had the boat welded to the deck.
That is true. I will say they also strapped the boat down to the deck, which is welded.
Yeah,
which
big
is
tie straps that go around the boat to the deck. again, it's going to be potentially 50 knots. And so once they get all that, stuff out of the way, they kind of then focus on the next boat, right? So we were allowed to get on the boat and do like last minute stuff. So get our food off and, grab our passports and whatever else we wanted to do. And there wasn't any pressure at that point because they were working on the next boat. One thing which is cool was we were by far the smallest boat up there, right? Like we were just a little. So the other boats these are big, big racing boats that are going over for the Fastnet race, or big giant motor yachts that someone bought and, back. It's peanuts, right? So we actually did feel kind of good because besides all the prep we had done to get windage down, we were kind of tucked in between all these other big boats. So that was pretty good. And then, once we were set, we went back to the foreman and said, hey, we're ready to go. And then they just called in a little launch. We got on the launch and then they bring it back to shore. Remember, sir, we kept our.
We did. I was going to recommend that. Yeah. So, we had, as discussed in previous episodes, we had a Iridium Go system for SMS, and it also has a little tracker. And so we had kept this tracker on for the entirety of our journey. We kept it on for the ride back. And it was very fun to watch Mediator go, 15 knots straight into the wind.
Yeah, and you can, with that tracker, right? It's with predict wind and the weather, it overlays on all the weather systems, so you can see it as it's like. It was really interesting, yeah, because when you're sailing a sailboat, you see this, 30-knot wind, and you're trying to avoid it, or you're trying to change your angle to the wind. This is on cruise control. This boat's just right into the wind.
So is the unload process basically the same? They give you a window, and then the closer you get, the more they zoom in, and then you get a phone call, say, hey, come on over.
Yes, but it makes sense. Interestingly, it took us 3 months to get over altogether. 17 days to get to the Azores. I think it was 4.5 days or 5 days they sailed back. So, I flew home, and 2 days later, Sean calls me and says, hey, Simon, we're going to be in Newport tomorrow morning. We'll pick you up 1 Sayers Way. It's a little dock behind the restaurant. We'll pick you up there at 6:30. And so I jumped in the car and drove down. So yeah, there's a window, but it's a very small window because it's underway now, right? So it's about 5 days. Could be 4, could be 6, but
yeah.
So yeah, and they called me. I drove down. We're about 3 hours from Newport, so I drove down, parked, found the dock, and it's cool. I always like the fact that when you go often to a sea town, there's what you see as a tourist, but then kind of below that, there's another working layer. So there's still a working harbor in Newport, and this aluminum launch pulls up, and the guy's like, "Are you Simon?" I'm like, "Yep." It's like, "Jump on." I jump on, they motor out, and we motor out to our ship, which is now sitting in the middle of Newport Harbor. And then similar thing, you pull up, they throw down a Jacob's ladder, you climb up, and they give you some time to kind of get on the boat and whatever you want to do. And then, are you ready? Yep. They pick you up, they lower you down on the boat. And this case actually was kind of weird. So they lowered me to the side of the boat. I was by myself, so I think Sawyer was at school already. So they lowered me down, and there's one guy with me, making sure that, I don't know what he's making sure. He's with me. So we lower down. We probably just touched water, and he goes, "Thanks for your business. See you next time." And then he just climbs up the ladder, and that's it. So, so I had put the backstay back on, and then I sailed, back up to our home marina.
And so the straps just kind of came off when they lowered you into the water, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a travel lift at your marina, right? There's these 2 straps, and then once you're in the water, you're floating, and then maybe they just connect one side so the strap hangs. Then they lifted the crane out of the way. It was actually being launched was very quick and almost like an Irish goodbye. It was just See ya. And that was, there we go.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like all in all, it was a good experience.
I think it was really good. Yeah. I mean, it was certainly interesting. And yeah, ultimately, we got our boat. It was kind of amazing. So we did this trip in the 3 months, and then within a week, our boat was right back home. I remember pulling into the same slip at the marina I left. Sawyer and I and my dad had left, June 2nd. The same exact slip is still open. And, I called them and they were saying, yeah, we haven't filled it yet. So I pulled in the same slip and looking at our boat mediator, kind of being like, wow, like went across the Atlantic, it came back, and here we are in the same season, right? Same summer. So no, I think it was good. Yeah, we got the boat back to where we live, and we didn't have any of the wear and tear. And, I guess we didn't mention one thing, right? The other option could have been to sell the boat, right? We could have left it in the UK and then put up for sale. But yeah, we have a lot of emotional attachment to this boat now, right? Even more so after having crossed. So I felt like that would be, we will probably sell it one day, but I didn't really want to sell it and abandon it on the side of the world, right? If I'm going to sell it, I want to sell it here in Rhode Island, and I feel like, it deserves that. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, very nice. So, start wrapping this up. Are there like one or two tips that you can give to somebody who's thinking about something like this?
In terms of the whole shipping?
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, obviously, like any contractor, you gets multiple quotes, right? Because you can see where it'll come. We end up using a real well-known kind of high tier company, but there's probably various others. So there was that. I would say certainly, I can't imagine doing this without being on your boat, like being there waiting for them to show up, right? I know you can, but there was quite a bit we had to do. Sawyer and I spent probably 2 full days scrambling, right, trying to get everything ready. Like you're supposed to try to wash the boat, use up most of the fuel, so we pumped out like 2/3 of our fuel, get rid of our water. It was a lot of work. And then motor up, and I think it'd be a little challenging to do that, giving someone else the keys. So that means having some flexibility in your plans, right? Whatever your plans are, wherever your end destination is, have another week that's built in, for this shipping to happen. Yeah, I guess that's all. I would. I'm not saying the delivery service is not a good option. I think it probably can be, but for us, I think this like shipping was probably the best solution for us to get our boat back.
Yeah. I mean, it's fast, right? If you would have had a delivery captain, the boat would have been gone for another month and a half or something.
They're sick. I mean, again, you have to sail based on the weather, right? So they weren't going to come back till December, whenever you.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Hurricane season and all that, and then you're not going to probably sail up from the Caribbean to Newport in January, right? You're probably going to wait till May. So,
right.
Yeah, it would have been a whole year.
Yeah.
So no, it was good. Yeah.
Very good. Is there anything else that we should have chatted about that we didn't?
No, I think that was it. I in some ways, I think it was like we maybe took a bit of a unique approach for being, as Simon said, we're very prepared, very thoughtful in the lead up to this trip, but that was only the first half. In the second half, we sort of were like, well, we'll figure it out as we go, and that is kind of the way that we've approached a lot of things. Is I think we do sometimes figure it out as we go, and in this case, it worked out. I think I don't know if we would have made the same decisions trying to get the boat back if we had to make them all before we left. Right. I think it was the experiences that we had crossing, and then, the experiences we had in the Azores, chatting with folks, that did inform our decision making.
Right. Yeah. You become smarter and more knowledgeable, and you have more facts by going through the process, if you will, right? Than making a decision before you do any of that. So that's great. All right. Hey, it's always great having you guys on the podcast. Always great to see you. And hopefully I'll see you at the marina now that we're in the same marina.
Thanks, Bill. Well, if you see where I'm sitting at our marina right now. So I'm just down for, if you recognize it, here's the,
Oh, I was going to say that didn't look like your house.
no. So
And
I'm
I
down here.
saw, so you're at the nice new clubhouse.
Nice new clubhouse. Yeah, I'm just poking around. It's the end of season, and season comes to a close, and you kind of, I don't know, you regret you didn't spend as much time on the water as you wanted to. So I just figured I'll come down for a couple of days and, I don't know, do a couple of projects, clean up and whatnot. So,
Yeah. Well,
that's
very
nice.
good.
Yeah, we'll see you soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, I hope so. Well, thanks again, guys. Take
Thanks,
care.
Bela.
Great. Thank you, Bela.
Cool interview, Bela. I mean, thinking about this from your perspective and knowing your sailing history, is this ever something you've dealt with in your sailing career? Have you ever kind of crossed this bridge?
No, because most of my trips, all of my sailing trips are round trips. So I go out and I have a plan to come back because it's a short trip. Now, I have helped people move their boats from point A to point B. I helped Simon and Sawyer move their boat from Florida because they bought it in Florida, and I helped them move it up to Newport. And I helped another friend of mine bring a boat from Halifax, Nova Scotia down to Baltimore. And so I've done those kind of one-way trips, but in my sailing, it's always a round trip. And I always think about it as a round trip. So it's not something that I think about. But it is interesting, right? And you do see people who take these long trips and then they don't know what to do at the end. And they have this asset, it's the boat. And okay, what am I going to do with it? And, I thought that was the interesting part of our conversation with Simon and Sawyer, that they sort of thought about it and they went through all the various different possibilities. And they ended up, shipping the boat back, which for them made a lot of sense. I think there are lots of examples of people who sail to a destination, they keep the boat there for 1 or 2 seasons, and then they sail to another destination, and then they keep the boat there for 1 or 2 seasons, and that gives them sort of time to explore, etc. And these are people who are not living on their boat full time. These are folks who maybe take a month off and they go sail around for a month. And there's several examples of people who have sailed around the world using that sort of part-time sailing around the world strategy, where you sail for a month or two, a couple of destinations, you leave the boat there, you store the boat. Wherever there's a marina, you can store a boat. There's a place you can store it. And as Simon mentioned, the rest of the world's typically a heck of a lot cheaper for doing some of these things than the United States is. It's pretty expensive to have a boat and store a boat here in the United States, whereas Simon was saying, even the UK, and Spain and stuff, it was pretty darn cheap. So that was sort of my 2 cents on that.
Interesting. Did you agree with the decision? I mean, what would you have done in their case?
Well, I'm retired, so I have a lot more time. Right.
True.
So I may have sailed the boat back because I can. And, like they said, bringing the boat back is a really long trip. It's like almost twice the length.
South and over and
right.
Time it just
and then
right.
back north again. You got to go south,
again.
then you got to head west, and you got to go back north again. So, the sailing routes is like it's like a box. and they sailed across the top of the box to get to Europe, and now coming back, they got to sail down one side along the bottom and then back up. So it's even a longer trip. And the other interesting thing that I never really thought about is sort of the wear and tear on the boat, right? I never, that didn't cross my mind, because you're sailing 24/7 for 20 days or 30 days to get the boat back here. That's like 10 seasons worth of sailing, of day sailing. So, your sails get worn out. All of your running rigging, all of that stuff gets worn out or gets a lot of extra use on it. So that's another thing that is sort of a hidden expense of sailing the boat back. Because it's not something you think about, okay, I need to do this. I need to pay crew, or I need to pay a captain. Well, there's this sort of hidden wear and tear on the boat. And it's significant. I think we did one of their previous episodes with those guys. We talked about some of the things that broke on their trip across the Atlantic, or things they had to replace once they got to the Azores. So it makes a lot of sense to me to ship it back. And I just thought it was kind of cool, right? This guy calls you up on the phone and says, "Hey, bring your boat over and bring it next to our big freighter." And they come and they pick it up, and
They pick it up.
they pick it up and they put it on, and they weld it to the deck, basically.
Yep, and meet you on the other side.
Meet you on the other side. Now, the other thing I didn't think about was this notion of, boy, you really have to prepare your boat, because it's
Those
sitting
things.
on it. Yeah. It's sitting on an open deck. It's not inside, right? It's not protected.
Storms and right.
Right.
Bumps and bruises and right.
And those guys they're going 20 knots. And if the wind is blowing 30 miles an hour from the direction they're going in, that's a 50-knot wind across the deck. So you really have to even prepare your boat more than you typically prepare it for winter storage around here. So I thought that was a new thing to me that I didn't know about. But it sounded like it went really well for them. It was efficient. They got the boat back quickly, which means now they can sail it right here.
Again.
So I thought it was a great decision.
Yeah, I did too. And it was a lot more complicated question than I originally thought too. But I love the thought process that Simon went through and kind of walked us through as he was doing that. So I hope the listeners enjoyed that as well. What do you think? Time to wrap this one up?
Yep, I think we should, Mike. Let's wrap it up.
Great. Well, listeners, thanks again for joining us for another episode. We hope you found our conversation, as always, interesting and thought-provoking. And as usual, if you have questions about what we've discussed, please feel free to get in touch with us. Our email is sailingtheeast, that's all one word, @gmail.com.
And if you enjoyed the podcast, hit that follow button on your favorite podcasting app. Help spread the word about the podcast. Leave us a review. And if you know of someone that would make a good guest on the show, let us know. We'll try to get them as a guest on one of our episodes. So hope to see you out there on the water soon. So until next time, signing off from upstate New York. Take care.
And from over here in Münster, Germany, thanks for listening and see you next time.